research methods. It is must for the student to follow the research methods if he wants the research to be authentic and fruitful. One part of research method is whether the research is doctrinal or non-doctrinal. There is a lot of confusion between these two types of research or kinds of research. As far as the doctrinal research is concerned, this particular research, it is said that it deals only with the theory part. It is a theoretical research. It is generally said that doctoral research deals with the theory part. Theory part means what? Means it deals with law, statutes or legislation, delegated legislation, judicial precedents. That means the law is analyzed. This term, to analyze law, means that the law is studied in detail. That is, either the law is compiled, or it is compared, or it is classified, or the loopholes are identified, or a gap, a vacuum, or a room for betterment the researcher tries to find out through the analysis of the doctrines or law or judicial precedents, percepts, concepts, terms, words. So it is a very broad aspect of research. Another aspect of doctrinal research is this, that the area of movement of the researcher is limited only to the library. It is only limited to the library. The area of the movement of the researcher is limited to the library. That is why the doctoral research is also called as the library method research, because the researcher doesn't have to go outside the library in order to find the data for his research. The entire data he finds them in the library only, because the statutes, the delegated legislation, precedents, concepts, terms, words, all are available in the library itself. That is why it is called as the library method. So the area, the physical area of movement is confined only to the library in case of the doctoral research. Another very important aspect is that the sources of data. The sources of data collection over here is that only secondary sources of data are used. Secondary tools of data collection are used. That means, what are the secondary tools of data collection? Books, textbooks, reference books, articles, journals, periodicals, newspapers, internet, case laws. They are classified as secondary tools of data collection, because here the researcher does not collect the data for the first time. He analyzes, he bases his study on the analysis of the data which has been already collected by somebody else. The creativity of the research over here is that he uses the data, but by using a data which has been already formulated, he creates another data. It is not to reproduce the same data. That is no research, because every research has to be creative. It has to be in furtherance of knowledge, as I had said. So if he uses the same data and does not create another data by using the same data, it amounts to no research. It is a futile work. This is very important. Even though he uses the secondary sources of data, by using them he creates another data. So, and when the secondary sources of data are used, then only the research is classified as doctrinal. So, whether the research is non-doctrinal or doctrinal depends upon the sources of data employed. This is very important. So, it is the sources of data which classify the research, whether it is doctrinal or non-doctrinal. Over here, I told you the physical area is limited. However, the scope of the research is very broad. The scope of the research is very broad. That means the researcher can sit in the library and conduct research of any doctrines, concepts, percepts, laws, statutes, subordinate legislation or judicial precedents anywhere in the entire universe. He can sit in the library and conduct a research of the say the entire common law legal system or entire civil law legal system or America or England, anywhere, any legal system he can analyze, he can study only by sitting in the library. In this sense, the scope of doctoral research is more wide. It is more wide because the material of all the legal systems available in the universe are there in front of him in the library, and through internet it is matter of minutes. The scope of the research, hence it is wide. This research, in this research, another classic feature of this research, that is sampling is totally absent. No sampling. Here the researcher cannot employ the technique of sampling. Sampling techniques are completely to be avoided because whatever material is available on his topic, he has to analyze, read, analyze, digest and then create another data. He can't say that out of 100 books I will use only 25 books. The research is incomplete. Because it is incomplete, it is futile. His research should be foolproof. That means when he is doing research, every material available on that particular aspect of his research should be read, and he should be able to either differentiate, distinguish or put it in the similar category. So there cannot be sampling. He has to read every book, every article, every case law. He has to read journals, newspapers, everything which is available over here till date. This is absolutely important. And through this research, theories can be built up. It is called as theory building research. Doctoral research is called as theory building research because it is through the doctoral research that theories can be built up always. So doctoral research is such a research wherein the person sits in the library and analyzes the concepts, the precepts, the laws, every law, any law. He can use induction or deductive method, whatever, and come to some conclusion of theory building. He has to create a data by using the secondary sources of data. This is the meaning of doctoral research. Now let us come to the other part, that is empirical or non-doctoral research. This research, it is said that it is based upon empirical evidence. Empirical evidence means that evidence which is collected by the five senses. Here he will collect the evidence for himself. He will collect the data. He will collect the information for himself. He will not use the data which is collected by somebody else. This in itself is creation. The other part of it is to analyze the data. But here he is collecting the data for the first time itself, and hence it is said that he uses the primary sources of data. Primary sources of data means he employs either the technique of interview or questionnaire or observation. Now when the researcher is planning to formulate his research design, at that time he should be well conversant with the nature of his population of the research, so that he knows whether which technique to collect data, primary technique to collect the data he should employ. So if the population is uneducated and it is small, he can go in for the interview technique, because if he is not educated he may not be able to understand the questions. So it might be interview technique. Plus, suppose he wants to get personal information, secretive information, information which may not be easily given in a questionnaire, then always interview technique is more useful. So he can go for that. But suppose the population is very large, population of the research, is very large, then he cannot employ interview technique. How many interviews he can conduct? 100,000. Best is to employ the questionnaire technique. When these two techniques, when the researcher feels that these two techniques will not help him to get the information, he can go in for the third technique, that is observation. Observation, like I said, when the population of the research is such that they cannot give the data has to be conceived by the researcher, then observation technique is employed. So in our case, like I said, the behavior of the children or more intimate behavior, suppose this information has to be got, then it is only through the observation. Otherwise it is for science. When the research is taken place on birds, trees, animals, then the observation technique is followed. But for law it is these two, primary sources of data. Now here is a word of caution. In non-doctrinal research, it is not that only primary sources of data are used. It is must, it is compulsory, it is absolutely mandatory, and it is absolutely under the obligation that the researcher also uses the secondary data. It is must for the researcher to use both the sources of data. Then and then only the empirical research is complete, the non-doctrinal research is complete. Like it is said, it is this research, it is the emphasis of this research is to see law in motion, or the implementation of law, or the impact of law on the society, isn't it? So what is the impact of law? He will get through the primary sources of data. But what about the law? He has to know something about the law. And where will he know about the law? By conducting interviews? By questionnaire? By observation? Of course not. He has to go through the statutes, the doctrines, the concepts, the precepts, judicial pronouncements. That is why it is said that a prerequisite of empirical research is the doctrinal research. First of all, he has to go back to the library, understand the law, then he can see the impact of law. If he is not comfortable with the law itself, how can he see the impact? So it is must for the researcher to undertake the doctrinal research first, and then go and collect the empirical evidence through the primary sources of data, because this research is based upon the implementation of the law, the working of the law, the impact of law upon the society, or they say it is law in motion. They want to see the actual working, functioning of the law in motion. So here it is a difficult task for the researcher, because he has to do both. It takes a longer time. The physical area of movement over here is more large. The physical movement over here is more large because he has to go to the entire territory of his research population. So he is doing study in the state of Maharashtra, then he has to see all the corners of Maharashtra. So from library, it is only library, and here he has to move outside the library. So the physical area of movement is much more larger as compared to the doctrinal research. However, physical area is larger, but the scope of research is narrow, because he cannot go to all the civil law legal countries and conduct interviews and questionnaires. So there is a physical limitation. That is why analysis cannot be drawn from far off places or other legal systems. This is the limitation of non-doctrinal research. This research is classified as fact finding. That means he the researcher's objective is to find the fact whether really the law is followed or not, like in the case of anti-dowry, whether who follows this law, who accepts, who rejects. So this is the main emphasis of the researcher of fact finding. Now here in the doctoral research it is theory building, and in the empirical research it is fact finding. But the research is not over yet. Both the researches are not over yet. The research will be complete only and only in the case of doctoral research after he comes to the theory building part. In his conclusion, he has to give the situations, the circumstances of application of the theory. So from theory he moves to practical application in the cases of doctoral research. And in the cases of non-doctoral research, he has already found out some situations, that is fact finding. Now he has to build a theory which will be applicable to the facts which he has produced. So from the fact finding he has to go to theory building. Then only the research, both the researches are complete. This is a very important aspect. Like I say, and I will repeat, there can be no theory which does not have a practical application. If it is so, that theory is redundant. Every theory has to have a practical application, and every practical application has to be based upon a theory. You can't have a practical application without no theory. It may happen that the theory does not have practical application. I told you such theories are categorized as redundant. Like for example, I go back to jurisprudence, Karl Marx. The theory is redundant as far as law is concerned, because the state and the law and the state, they never wither away. So now do we study that theory? This is what happens to a theory when there is no practical application. Now, as I said, or I started, that these are the two kinds of research. Now let us understand really whether there are two kinds of research. Over here, the legal concepts, precepts, statutes, judicial legislations, judicial pronouncements, legislations are analyzed, and here the functioning of the law is seen. That is, the functioning of the judicial precedents, the law is seen. So we can say that the non-doctoral research is just an extension of the doctoral research. Rather than two kinds of researches, here some theory is found out, here the application of the theory is found out. So we can say that it is just an extension of the doctoral research, and the prerequisite of every non-doctoral research is to study the secondary sources of data which are relevant. There cannot be non-doctoral research only on the basis of primary sources of data. The researcher can never complete his research. It will not be a complete research. Now another caution over here is this, that law is a social science. It cannot be, any research in law cannot be a scientific research. Now because of this, sometimes it happens that the problem of objectivity, neutrality, it is minimized. But the researcher should take lots of efforts to see that the objectivity, the ethical neutrality of the scientific method is maintained. That means his hopes, his faith, his likes, his dislikes, his values should not come in between the research. It should not influence his research work, because in scientific research the variables are under control. Here the variables are not under control, so exact predictions may not be possible, but we can go to the near exact predictions. So 2 plus 2 may not be 4 like it is in science, but we can reach the exact or near exact prediction. This the research has to do by meticulously following the steps, 10 steps of research methods. Now let us come to the first, that is identification of the problem. Identification of the problem. How to identify the problem? The research begins with the problem. So let us see what we should do to identify the research problem. Identification of the research problem. The prerequisite of this step, the first step of research, is identification of the problem. The prerequisite is this, that the researcher has to have a thorough understanding of the subject in which he is going to do research. There can be no research if he doesn't have adequate, accurate, precise knowledge of the subject in which he is going to do research. So he has to first understand the entire literature which is available on his subject of research. From the entire subject he has to choose the topic. From the topic a particular title, and from the title he has to formulate the problem. So he has to read the entire available literature wherever it is possible. When he finishes reading, then while reading or after he finishes reading, he has to identify the areas wherein he has not understood. There is a doubt, there is a gap, or he feels like criticizing a particular situation, a particular law. That becomes the research problem. So to have a doubt, first you have to read. To identify a gap, a loophole, some vacuum, some loss, some ambiguity, some vagueness, this will know when we are conversant with the subject. If we are not conversant with the subject, then we cannot identify the weak areas in our subject. They are the problems for the research. Then this is how we can identify a problem of the researcher. But suppose even after reading he is unable to find a research problem, identify a research problem. He is not finding any loophole or a gap or a vacuum or some doubt. Then the next is he has to discuss with an expert whatever literature he has read. Now he has to discuss that literature with an expert. So once the discussion starts, at that time he is able to identify the areas, the weak areas or the lacunas or the gap or the vagueness of a particular aspect in the subject of his liking. After he discusses, it is through discussion that the loopholes can be caught. So this is how he has to go about finding the problem. Then he has to put the problem in the statement form. It is advisable to always put the problem in a statement form. It is not consonance in good research that you have this. Like, what are the reasons for the failure of the Dowry Act? What, when, how, why? These words you should try to eliminate. Put it in statement forms. Reasons for the failure of the Dowry Act. Dowry Act, a success or failure? So try to put it in statement form. That statement should be absolutely clear. It should be very clear. It should be very understandable. It should be very clear. It should be understandable. It is to be remembered that the problem is the opener of the research. The research opens with the problem. So how will we like the opening? Very precise, very concise, isn't it? So the problem should be stated in such a manner that the reader gets an insight to the entire research. It is stated that a well formulated problem is half the solution to the problem. If you state your problem very well analytically, then half the solution is in that itself. So that opener of the research should be very clear. The researcher should get the exact idea. The skill of the researcher is in this, that he is able to communicate his ideas, his thoughts, his theory to the researcher as he has conceived. It should not be that he has conceived one aspect, the reader is having some other thought or some other aspect. Then the whole purpose of the research is defeated, because the research is conducted for the subjects, for the society, not for his satisfaction or marks or whatever other criteria is. So it has to be very clear, it has to be easy, understandable, and it has to give insight to the particular reader. This is the identification of the problem. There should not be the state of problemlessness. That means many a times the researcher says, I cannot find a problem. There is a state of problemlessness. If a researcher is in this state of problemlessness, that means he has to read. The more you read, the more doubts are formulated. After reading, let him discuss, rediscuss and analyze. While discussing, the researcher should make points of analysis of the entire subject and go through it again and again. Then only he will come to know that yes, there is a lacuna or there is a problem in this particular area. So identification of the problem is the first step of the researcher. It has to be done very, very systematically and very, very cautiously. It should not happen that he has formulated a wrong problem. Wrong problem means beginning is wrong, means the whole research is wrong. So he has to be very, very accurate, very, very precise. Take time in formulating the problem, but formulate the problem in a very systematic, scientific, clear, understandable manner. And the only method of identification of the problem is to read and discuss. It is said, no, there is no shortcut to truth. So research is very painstaking. Everybody and anybody cannot conduct research. There has to be a mindset, a typical mindset, mind approach for conducting research. We cannot be very hasty in conducting the research. We have to read and reread the entire literature for many times. Then only we can come to the real formulation of the problem. So we cannot make haste in formulating the problem. The next step and a very important step is to identify the scope of research, like I have said yesterday. Scope of research. The outlines of research, they have to be predetermined before we embark upon a research. Whatever outlines, whatever limitations of the research, the researcher has to identify beforehand itself. So the scope of research can be identified in two ways. If the research is doctoral research, that is purely doctoral research, then what he has to do is he has to define the scope in consonance with the subjects, that this research is conducted in this particular subject under this topic. However, other topics which are relevant he is referring. For example, in law, every researcher will conduct the research in the own area of the subject, of course, but also constitution, also jurisprudence, also research methods. These are must. So he has to state that relevant portion of constitution, whichever articles are in consonance, whatever portion of jurisprudence, whatever the entire portion of research methods is applicable in the scope of his research. His research would be touching those aspects. This he has to state before. How can a law student conduct a research without referring to a constitutional provision or jurisprudence principles? It is must. But if the research is non-doctoral research, empirical research, then there are two ways of identifying the scope. One is the subjects, that is correct, under which subject he is going to conduct his own subject, that is his specialization under which he is conducting the research, plus constitution, jurisprudence, research methods. And the other is the territorial limits. His research is confined to the district of Pune, the suburbs of Pune, the Kothurud area, Maharashtra, whatever. So the territorial limits have to be identified. Otherwise, how, I mean, his application of the theory, if he conducts the research in Maharashtra, it will not be applicable in Delhi. So he has to, the reader has to apply the theory in the same area in which he has conducted the research. So the scope has to be very, very minutely, finely defined, and the researcher cannot go out of the scope of the research. Once he stated, then he has to stick with that. It helps the researcher to be more, make the research more manageable first of all, and it brings a system, a direction, because if there is no scope, if the scope is only not defined, anything and everything may fall in the research, then how will he collect the data? It becomes difficult. So first he has to, it is same, no? First we identify the location, no? How much area is there, then we build the building. Can we build the building without identification of the area? It is similar. So first we identify the area in which we are going to do the actual research. Two ways, one is the subject and the other is the territory. Like I have said yesterday, again the third is that the research should be completed in the same time frame in which it was conceived and commenced. He starts the research 2019 and completes 2030. What happens to the facts and to the law? All outdated. So that time frame is the limitation for the researcher to complete well within time. He has to complete in the same time frame. This is to minimize the error. After the scope, the next aspect is conceptual clarity. Concepts should be clear. Concepts should be absolutely clear. What is the meaning of concepts? Concepts means the words, the terms which he is going to use in his own research. The researcher, his research is going to revolve around some concepts, no? So those concepts he has to identify beforehand. He knows that his research will contain certain concepts because he has understood and read the literature very well. So he knows what are the words which he is going to frequently deal with. These should be identified and he should be able to attribute the meaning of those words beforehand. Once he has done this, it helps the researcher not to stray, and more importantly it helps for the readers to understand the research, because there is oneness of thought. The meaning of the word which the researcher has in mind, the same meaning the reader will have in mind. But suppose he is not identified the concepts, then any reader can attribute any meaning to the concept of the research, and then can the research be understood as the researcher has conceived in his mind? Again, the purpose of the research is lost. So I told you the trick, the skill, the knack of the researcher is to able to communicate what is in his mind. So for that he has to take certain steps, and one of the steps is to see that the concepts, the key words, the main words which occur and reoccur in his thesis, in his research, he has to identify and make a list and say that for the purpose of this research, the meaning of the following terms are as follows. 1, 2, 3, 4. He has to give the meaning. If he is going to refer to a statute, he has to state that the same meaning in so and so statute, so and so section. It might be general clauses, act or whatever, but he has to state there very, very clearly all the concepts. This eliminates vagueness, ambiguity, It makes the research more clear, more correct, more accurate, even for the researcher and for the readers. So conceptual clarity, there has to be certain conceptual clarity. The next aspect is the hypothesis. Hypothesis. Once the problem is formulated, then the researcher has to formulate a tentative solution to that problem. The tentative solution is called as the hypothesis. It is also called as the hypothetical proposition. It is only a proposition. Proposition means something which may take place, and it is hypothetical. It does not have any basis. Hypothetical means it is just assumed. It does not have the basis of the evidence of the fact, whichever data which is to be collected. Now, hypothesis formulation is required because, like I said, the human mind is of that nature that once the problem is formulated, immediately the human mind also formulates a solution. So I like to give an example, a hypothetical example. Like suppose my daughter comes home late. This is my problem. Why is she late? Now in that anxiety, this problem I am facing, but simultaneously in my mind, she has not met an accident. Her teacher has not left her late. Has she gone somewhere without telling me? These are the hypotheses. So finally she comes home and she says, Mama, I was late because my teacher left me late. So out of the three, one of the hypothesis was proved correct, same as with this research. When we are reading, we have that gap, we have that doubt, but similarly we have in our mind that this can be overcome like this. The solution might be like this, but we don't know whether that solution is appropriate or not. To find out whether the solution is appropriate or not, we have to conduct the entire research. So hypothesis is what? It is a tentative solution to the problem which has been formulated. It is a tentative solution to the problem which has been formulated. Now, when the solution is formulated or when the hypothesis is formulated, it is mandatory that it has to be correlated to the problem. It has to be correlated to the problem. The problem speaks about A and the hypothesis speaks about B. Can we say that this hypothesis is a tentative solution to the problem formulated? They are said to be the two sides of the same coin, so they have to be connected, they have to be correlated, they have to be correlated to one another. Not only this, suppose he has identified two problems and hypothesis 20. They have to be in consonance, they have to be in consistency with one another, they have to be correlated. Not only this, also the hypothesis has to be, of course the problem also and the hypothesis also, they have to be in consonance with the objectives. Objectives are the nucleus of the research. Like I said, it is the hook of the entire research. The whole research is hooked on the basis of the objectives which the researcher wants to achieve, and the entire research is the umbrella. So they have to, every step, whether it is data collection, whether it is sampling, whether it is inferences, whether it is analysis, whether it is identification of the problem or whatever hypothesis, they have to correlate to the objectives. It cannot happen that you have one set of objective and the other things are not related. No research. What happens to the umbrella? Falls down. So the hypothesis has to be correlated to the problem as well as objective. It is absolutely must. Of course, the hypothesis actually it helps in collecting data. hypothesis is an indicator of data collection. It helps in data collection. That is why it is important. Like for example, this same problem, why my daughter has come home late. Now this is the problem. My hypothesis is that she has gone to a friend's house without telling me, or her classroom has been left late. This is the hypothesis. Then what I do? I call the school when the class is left. But this I can do when I know or I have formulated the solution that she might be in school or she might have gone to some friend. So I know the frequency. When the literature is well read and understood, hypothesis can be easily formulated. So I know my friends of the daughter, so I call each friend, is she there, where were you, what was the class left. So this is how I collect the information. What has helped me to collect the information? The hypotheses. So hypotheses help in collecting the data. They are indicator of collecting the data. Where the possible data can be collected from. They give a clue to the data collection, the hypotheses. The hypotheses, the whole research is conducted in order to prove or disprove the hypotheses. So the problem is formulated, the hypothesis is formulated, and the entire research is conducted in proving or disproving of the hypothesis. The whole research opens with the research problem and is concluded by proving or disproving of the hypothesis. That important is the hypothesis. One word of caution. Suppose the hypothesis is proved to be incorrect. What happens to the research? The merit of the research is not hampered because the hypothesis is not proved. Whether the hypothesis is proved correct or it is proved incorrect, the utility, the fruitfulness, the significance, the value, the merit of the research is not at all affected. It is immaterial whether the hypothesis is proved correct or incorrect. The value, the usefulness, the importance of the research is not at all hampered if the hypothesis is disproved. Mention it in the conclusion that the hypothesis was disproved. This was the hypothesis. These are the facts. Based upon the facts, the above hypothesis is disproved. That's all. The research is still meritorious because it gives further scope for formulation of another hypothesis by another researcher. So this research, every research becomes a stepping stone for another research. That is no knowledge. It has to be every time in furtherance. So every research is a step for another research. But we have to say this in the conclusion. But again, mind you, the value of the research is not affected either by proving or disproving of the hypotheses. Characteristics of the hypothesis should be clear, it should be understandable, it should be precise, it should correlate with the things which are even though it is a hypothetical proposition, it should be correlative to the present situation of the research problem. It should not be vague, because then how can we prove or we can disprove? So it has to be in consonance with the whatever event, circumstances, position of the research is at that particular time. So just because it is a hypothetical situation, this doesn't mean that it has to be vague or it can speak about any aspects which are not at all in existence. The hypothetical situation in the present existing situation, this is the skill of the researcher to formulate the hypothesis. Another aspect of hypothesis is this, that there may be alternative hypotheses. What is the meaning of alternative hypothesis? like the same example, whether the classroom was left late, whether she has gone to a friend, whether she has met an accident. So these are the alternative hypotheses. Alternative hypotheses also help the researcher. Once the facts are collected, he can disprove one after the other but you cannot have 10 alternative hypotheses, one or two, otherwise then it becomes very difficult. So alternative hypotheses also help the researcher to eliminate, so that the data is not collected in the wrong direction. If he has so many hypotheses, then how much data he is going to collect, because they are indicators of data collection. So he should not go away from his main theme of research. So alternative hypotheses. Another aspect of hypothesis is null and void hypotheses. Null and void hypotheses. So what is a null and void hypothesis? Null and void hypotheses are those hypotheses wherein they are formulated in order to be disproved. Like the null and void hypothesis states that there is no difference between two circumstances. They are same. The research is conducted and then we find out that there is difference between two circumstances, so the hypothesis is disproved. So evidence is collected in order to disprove the hypothesis. That is called as null and void hypothesis. The best example I can give you is in criminal law. It is said, principles of criminal law say that every person is innocent unless and until he is proved guilty, right? So this becomes the null and void hypothesis, because the prosecutor, he collects the evidence to show that the accused is not guilty. Have you followed? So null and void hypothesis help us in refuting the hypothesis itself. It is not used so frequently in legal research, but still there is a concept called as null and void hypotheses. Now the sources of hypothesis. From where does this hypothesis emerge? How it is to be formulated? The hypothesis, the best source of hypothesis is knowledge. If the researcher is well conversant with his studies, then the source of hypothesis germs from the knowledge itself or experience. Knowledge or experience. That is why it is said, no, research has to be conducted by experienced people, but now it is not like that. Young scholars are also, they are more better. So knowledge, experience or history. What is to be done? Suppose we are either doctrinal or non-doctrinal. Suppose we are studying a particular statute, then go to the history, go to the debates, go to the drafts. Hypothesis can emerge from the history or by comparing. This is the situation, we are studying the Indian law, compare it with some other legal system. Through comparison we can get hypothesis, or by drawing analogy. Analogy is to see how this legal system and how another legal system is working. So what are the similarities? What are the differences? We can get hypothesis through studying another different legal system, through analogy or through comparison or through distinguishing. Or it might be a guess. The researcher simply feels that it is his guess that the solution to this problem may be this. Or it might be an hunch, or it might be an idea. These are the sources of hypothesis. Hypothesis plays comparatively a vital role in the research because it helps the researcher to collect the data. It gives him an insight to where, in which direction he has to move to find out the solution, because he starts with the problem and then he has to end with the solution. So it helps him to find out the solution. This is hypothesis. So we'll deal with the other steps next time.